What if I told you Prince Harry was rushed to the hospital after an overdose, and the person allegedly pulling the strings isn't Meghan, but her mother, Doria Ragland? Tonight, Lady Colin Campbell breaks her silence with explosive claims. Not only is Prince Harry battling a medical emergency, but behind closed doors, he may be under the quiet but powerful control of his mother-in-law. Why was Meghan hundreds of miles away when it happened? Who's managing Harry's medications? And why is Buckingham Palace staying silent? This isn't just a family crisis. It could be the darkest chapter yet in the Sussex story. What we uncovered will leave you stunned. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. What if the fairy tale turned nightmare wasn't just a story whispered in royal corridors, but a real-life emergency now playing out in hospital rooms and private jets? What if the smiling face we once saw walking behind Queen Elizabeth's coffin was now fighting for his life, alone, drugged, and, as one insider suggests, possibly being controlled by his mother-in-law? Late last night, whispers began circulating through royal insider circles and online forums. The kind of whispers that make you stop scrolling. The kind of whispers that make even the most skeptical reader pause. Prince Harry, once heralded as the rebel prince, the war hero, the outspoken royal who turned his back on the crown for love, is now reportedly in a hospital following an alleged overdose. And behind this alarming incident, there are claims far more chilling than the medical report itself. Lady Colin Campbell, known to the world simply as Lady C, has come forward, not with theories or speculation, but with what she asserts is first-hand confirmation. Prince Harry's condition is not just medical. It's the symptom of a larger, far more dangerous reality. According to her, Harry's life is not his own. His choices? Not entirely his. His independence? A facade. The strings, she suggests, are being pulled by someone unexpected. Not Meghan Markle, the Duchess so often blamed in public discourse, but rather Doria Ragland, Meghan's mother, quiet, reserved, and often left out of the narrative. This isn't just a scandal. It's a potential unraveling of everything we thought we knew about the Sussex saga. A man's freedom, his mental health, and his relationship with his children all potentially compromised in a twist that no one saw coming. It is no longer about royal protocol or family feuds. It's about survival. It's about control. It's about power in the shadows. The silence from Buckingham Palace is deafening. Not a word from King Charles, not a whisper from Prince William. The tabloids have their hands full spinning superficial angles, fatigue, exhaustion, stress. But underneath it all, Lady C is drawing a map that leads somewhere darker. She's not just any commentator. She's the woman who wrote one of the most damning royal biographies of our time. A woman who has personally dined, corresponded, and feuded with members of the aristocracy and the House of Windsor itself. When Lady C speaks, people may roll their eyes, but they also listen. Because more often than not, she's painfully, uncomfortably accurate. So why would she speak out now? Why this moment, when Prince Harry is allegedly lying in a hospital bed, his security team scrambling, his image once again fractured? Is it for fame? Is it for exposure? Or is it something deeper, something urgent? Could it be that Lady C has seen too much, heard too much, and knows that if someone doesn't say something now, it might be too late? This story doesn't begin at the hospital. It doesn't begin with a medical report. It begins with a pattern. A string of small, seemingly disconnected choices and behaviors that, when laid out chronologically, start to form a clear and troubling picture. You'll hear about whispered arguments behind closed doors in Montecito, private security footage reportedly sealed behind NDA agreements, public appearances that looked off, glazed eyes, slurred speech, rushed exits. Even his own recent interviews, which in hindsight were peppered with signals most of us missed. What if those moments weren't just bad days? What if they were cries for help? And then there's Doria Ragland, the yoga instructor turned maternal overseer. A woman often described in interviews as calm, spiritual, gentle. But how much do we really know? How often has she been present when Harry has vanished from the public eye? How much access does she have to the finances, the household, and, most importantly, Harry himself? Is it possible that while we were all distracted by Meghan's ambition and the couple's endless media ventures, someone else was pulling strings from the shadows? This isn't a theory cooked up in an online forum. This is the claim coming from a woman who spent her life surrounded by the elite, who knows how power works behind velvet curtains. Lady C isn't asking you to believe her. She's laying down breadcrumbs and daring the public to follow them. Over the next hour, we will unpack every layer of this growing scandal. From Harry's recent public behavior to the silence of the royal family. From the alarming claims of an overdose to the chilling suggestion of manipulation by a woman the public barely notices. We'll dive into hospital records, recent paparazzi photos, tabloid leaks, and eyewitness statements. And you'll hear quotes from former palace aides, legal experts, and public figures who've crossed paths with both Harry and Doria. But first, we need to understand the stakes. Because this isn't just about a prince in peril. This is about the future of two children, Archie and Lilibet, who may be caught in the middle of a power struggle more insidious than any custody battle. This is about a man who may have surrendered his last tie to the institution he was born into. This is about a system that allowed this all to happen. The journey we're about to take will challenge assumptions. It will raise uncomfortable questions. It will make you wonder, how far will people go to protect a brand, even if that brand is built on someone else's breakdown? Stay with us. What you're about to hear isn't just gossip. It's a warning. We're starting with a timeline, not the one you read in the tabloids, but the one Lady C and her close contacts have privately kept. Because the road to this hospital visit is not random. It's systematic. And for Harry, it might be the beginning of the end, or the final cry for help before he disappears entirely from public view. Have you ever asked yourself, where is Prince Harry, really, right now? Because the answer might not be what the palace, the press, or even his own wife wants you to know. And that's just the beginning. The morning broke with unease. A subtle shift in headlines. A ripple, not yet a wave, of information that hinted something had gone terribly wrong. No front-page alerts, no dramatic photos of flashing ambulance lights. Just a few carefully placed words in an online forum that began to echo louder than expected. Prince Harry had been rushed to the hospital under what sources cautiously described as undisclosed circumstances. It didn't take long for royal watchers to start connecting the dots. The prince hadn't been seen publicly for several days, unusual even for someone trying to avoid paparazzi. His podcast appearances had been delayed. His scheduled engagement, a veterans' mental health roundtable slated for the week, had been mysteriously canceled without explanation. No social media presence, no coordinated PR distraction from Archwell, no media interview scheduled to spin a new narrative. Just silence. And silence, when it comes to the royals, almost always means trouble. The hospital in question, believed to be a private medical facility in Santa Barbara County, is known for its discretion. Celebrities, politicians, and billionaires quietly use it for emergencies when public hospitals might create more exposure. According to a staff member who asked not to be named, a high-profile patient was brought in late at night under tight security. The facility was swept by a private protection unit, and additional security was quietly hired through an external firm, all within hours. That's when things began to escalate. Multiple bodyguards, familiar from past Harry and Meghan photos, were spotted pacing the perimeter. Vehicles associated with Archwell's security fleet were observed in the staff parking zone. And insiders reported seeing a woman with dreadlocks, sunglasses, and a scarf pulled tightly around her head, a figure believed to be Doria Ragland, arrive hours later. No royal insignia, no official statements. But there was something different about this incident. The palace hadn't issued a denial, but more notably, they hadn't issued a statement at all. Journalists reached out. Calls to the Sussex's Montecito mansion went unanswered. Requests for comment from their PR team at Sunshine Sachs were returned with the typical deflections. We don't comment on the personal medical matters of clients. But that didn't stop speculation. In fact, it fueled it. Enter Lady C. In a stunning move, the longtime royal insider and author broke her usual rhythm of controlled commentary and released an unscheduled statement on a live podcast. Her voice was calm, but her message was anything but. There's something very wrong with Prince Harry at the moment. Very wrong, she said. He's not simply unwell. He's been brought to the hospital because of an overdose. And people need to stop pretending this is just stress. The hosts fell silent. No interruptions. No challenge. Lady C didn't flinch. This has been coming for a long time. I've warned for years that the man is not being protected. And I'll tell you who's ensuring that he stays exactly where he is, under control. It's not Meghan. It's her mother. Doria is managing him very well. Very well indeed. Those words sent shockwaves through every online royal forum. Screenshots were circulated within minutes. YouTube channels re-uploaded the clip. Comment sections exploded. This was no longer just a hospital rumor. It had become a full-blown royal emergency. But what exactly happened? From what few details could be verified, Prince Harry was discovered unconscious, allegedly by a member of staff at his Montecito residence. He had reportedly been in isolation in his private suite for over a day. No interaction with the children. No response to calls. Meghan, according to some, was said to be out of town during that period, reportedly on the East Coast for meetings with Netflix executives. Was he alone? Was Doria present? Did someone delay calling for help? The ambulance arrived without sirens, a technique often used in high-profile recoveries to prevent neighborhood panic. He was transported not to the nearest hospital, but to one located 40 minutes away, a facility equipped with high-security wings and advanced psychiatric care units. He was placed under 24-hour watch immediately upon arrival. A well-placed source who has provided accurate insights in the past offered an alarming quote. "This isn't his first scare, but it's the one no one could contain. That's why you're hearing whispers. It was bad enough they couldn't hide it this time. What could cause such a physical collapse?" Speculation points to a combination of prescription medication, emotional exhaustion, and, potentially, substance use. While no official toxicology report has been released, it is known that Harry has publicly admitted in both his memoir and his interviews to past struggles with drugs. He has spoken candidly about using psychedelics, cocaine, and marijuana in his youth, and even into adulthood, framing it as part of his emotional healing journey. But was that journey more dangerous than he let on? Some observers noted signs in his most recent appearances that something was off. Slower speech, unfocused eyes, and a slight slur in a video he recorded for a veterans charity. At the time, these moments were dismissed as tiredness or poor audio quality. But now, rewatching them paints a different picture. Medical professionals consulted for commentary agreed that these behaviors can indicate substance misuse, or at the very least, a cocktail of medications and emotional destabilization. It's not uncommon for someone under severe psychological stress, especially someone isolated from family support, to lean too heavily on sedatives or anti-anxiety drugs, said one psychiatrist familiar with celebrity mental health cases. And when those substances are paired with sleep medications, it can be a dangerous mix, particularly without proper supervision. It raises a bigger question. Who is supervising Harry? Despite the assumption that Meghan is his gatekeeper, more insiders are beginning to whisper that Doria Ragland has become the main figure controlling Harry's environment. Described as calm and nurturing by some, others say she is far more influential behind the scenes than anyone understands. She reportedly lives part-time in a guest house near the Sussex estate and is heavily involved in daily routines, including time with the children, meal preparations, and staff management. If Meghan is the public force, Doria is the private enforcer. And it's this setup that has Lady C so alarmed. She has access to everything, his medicine cabinet, his moods, his triggers, she said during the podcast. And if you believe she's only there to help, then you don't understand how control works in dysfunctional households. It's a chilling accusation. Because if true, it means the person meant to offer comfort and guidance could be enabling or even orchestrating emotional dependency. Within hours of Lady C's podcast airing, independent bloggers began gathering photographic evidence. Images of Doria escorting Harry into buildings, standing just off camera during key photo ops, and even walking beside him at wellness centers, images most viewers had overlooked now resurfaced with a new lens. The impact was immediate. Hashtags began trending. Hashtag Where is Harry? Hashtag Doriagate, and hashtag Free Harry. Comment sections swelled with sympathy, outrage, and confusion. Public opinion seemed divided. Some accusing the media of pushing another conspiracy, others pointing to Lady C's past accuracy with an unflinching belief that she's telling the truth. Even former royal aides weighed in. One anonymous former member of the Kensington Palace staff stated, "We always feared something like this would happen. Not necessarily the overdose, but the collapse. You could see it in his eyes. He was fading before he ever left the palace gates." The story has reached a tipping point. No longer confined to tabloids or YouTube commentary, it's bleeding into mainstream coverage. Morning talk shows have begun hinting at health-related concerns without naming sources. British newspapers have issued vague updates about Harry resting privately. And yet, with no official denial or clarification from either Buckingham Palace or Archewell, the silence feels like confirmation. This breaking news isn't just about Harry being in the hospital. It's about how he got there, who knew it was coming, and who, if anyone, is trying to get him out. If this is the truth Lady C is warning us about, it's only the beginning. To understand the gravity of the claim that Prince Harry is in the hospital due to an overdose, and that he's allegedly under the tight control of his mother-in-law Doria Ragland, you need to first understand the woman making the claim. Lady Colin Campbell, often referred to simply as Lady C, is not just another commentator throwing opinions into the royal firestorm. She's a woman with deep aristocratic roots, an extensive history with the British royal family, and a reputation for speaking truths others are too afraid to utter. Lady C is polarizing, no doubt about that. To some, she's a scandal-chasing provocateur. To others, she's the voice that dares to challenge the carefully curated illusions of royalty and the celebrity machinery that surrounds it. But regardless of where one stands on the spectrum of public opinion, Lady C cannot be dismissed. Because time and time again, her statements, initially brushed off as gossip, have been proven uncomfortably accurate. Born Georgia Giotti in Jamaica, Lady Colin Campbell hails from a prominent family tied to aristocracy and colonial wealth. Her entrance into British high society came not through mere proximity, but through marriage. She became Lady Colin Campbell after marrying Lord Colin Ivar Campbell, the younger son of the 11th Duke of Argyll. Though the marriage was short-lived and filled with controversy, the title remained, and with it, her access to the exclusive circles of Britain's upper crust. But what truly cemented her place as a royal commentator wasn't her marriage or her heritage, it was her pen. In 1992, she authored a biography that would rattle Buckingham Palace to its core, titled Diana in Private. The Princess Nobody Knows, the book revealed, for the first time, the truth about Princess Diana's struggles with bulimia, her emotional volatility, and the deeply fractured state of her marriage to Prince Charles. At the time, the book was met with outrage from the palace and skepticism from the press. But when Diana herself confirmed many of the book's claims during her BBC Panorama interview in 1995, Lady C was vindicated. From that moment on, she wasn't just a socialite or a writer, she became a force in royal journalism. Her books on Queen Elizabeth II and Meghan Markle have consistently topped charts. But what sets her apart isn't just her insider access. It's her fearlessness. Lady C says what others won't. She names names. She makes connections. And she rarely, if ever, retracts. So when Lady C speaks about Prince Harry, people listen, even if they don't want to. In recent years, Lady C has been particularly vocal about the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. From the couple's departure from royal duties to their explosive interview with Oprah Winfrey, she has offered biting critiques and deep dives into what she calls the weaponization of victimhood. She has questioned the authenticity of Meghan's stories, the motives behind Harry's public statements, and the couple's ongoing attempts to both profit from and distance themselves from the monarchy. But nothing she's said before carries quite the weight of this latest revelation. Because claiming that Prince Harry is in the hospital due to an overdose is not just a personal or political attack, it's a matter of life, health, and potential exploitation. Lady C's podcast appearance, where she dropped this bombshell, was not part of a book tour or a promotional event. It was an unscheduled, seemingly impulsive appearance on a channel known for in-depth royal analysis. Her voice was low, deliberate, and devoid of any theatrical inflection. She was not selling a story. She was delivering a warning. "I've known for quite some time that Harry's not well," she said. "But the recent episode is what forced my hand. This isn't a tabloid tale. This is a serious situation. The man is being controlled, not cared for controlled." That last word hung in the air like smoke. Controlled. Not by aides, not by palace handlers, but by his mother-in-law, a woman who has, until now, stayed largely out of the spotlight. According to Lady C, Doria Ragland has become a far more central figure in Harry's day-to-day life than anyone in the media has acknowledged. She claims that Doria has access to Harry's medical information, his schedule, and even his emotional triggers. She paints a picture not of overt abuse or manipulation, but of subtle and calculated dominance. A quiet influence that dictates who Harry speaks to, what medication he takes, and when he sees his own children. This claim, while disturbing, gains weight when considered alongside Lady C's past accuracy. In her book on Meghan Markle, Lady C was one of the first to point out discrepancies in the timeline of Meghan's estrangement from her father. She was also among the earliest voices to question the secrecy surrounding the birth of Archie Harrison, citing inconsistencies in official statements and hospital records. While she was criticized at the time, many of those questions still remain unanswered. So why is Lady C choosing to speak out now? According to her, she waited as long as she could. She gave the Sussexes the benefit of the doubt. But what she reportedly heard from sources close to the couple in early June alarmed her so deeply that she felt morally compelled to act. "Whether people believe me or not is irrelevant," she said in the podcast. "What matters is that Prince Harry may not be in control of his life anymore. And someone has to say it out loud." Her tone wasn't that of a gossip columnist. It was closer to that of a concerned matriarch, someone watching a younger member of the family spiral while everyone else pretends not to notice. It's important to note that Lady C is not without her detractors. Critics have called her brash, outdated, even vengeful. She's been accused of seeking publicity and profiting from royal drama. But the question remains, why do her claims so often ring true? Why do they so often precede major shifts in public perception? Because whether you love her or hate her, Lady C doesn't operate in the dark. She's not guessing. Her network of contacts includes former palace staff, retired aristocrats, and inner circle informants whose names never make the papers. And when she chooses to speak publicly, it's usually after confirming her information through multiple channels. This lends credibility to her claim about Prince Harry's overdose. Because Lady C wouldn't risk her reputation on a baseless rumor. Not with stakes this high. Not when legal action could follow. Not when reputational damage could be irreversible. There's also the question of tone. In previous interviews, Lady C has used wit, sarcasm, and dramatic flair. But in this podcast appearance, she was different. She was subdued, careful, almost mournful. It wasn't the voice of a woman trying to shock an audience. It was the voice of someone who believes they're sounding an alarm before it's too late. This shift in tone has not gone unnoticed. Longtime followers of Lady C have remarked that she seems genuinely distressed. Not gleeful, not smug, but burdened. As if holding on to the information any longer would make her complicit in whatever might come next. It's this authenticity, this consistency, that makes Lady C's words resonate. In a media landscape flooded with speculation, conspiracy, and celebrity gossip, it's rare to find a figure who combines access with conviction. Who doesn't need to go viral, but does. Who doesn't need to be right, but often is. So when she says that Prince Harry is in the hospital, not because of burnout or stress, but because of a chemical event that left him unresponsive, people listen. When she says that someone in his immediate circle is holding the reins of his life too tightly, people pause. And when she says that the situation is far more dangerous than anyone realizes, people take note. Because Lady C, for all her controversy, has never cried wolf. As this story unfolds, her role will become increasingly critical. Not because she claims to know everything, but because she's willing to say what others won't. And in a situation where silence can be deadly, her voice may be the one warning that ultimately saves a life or exposes a truth no one wanted to believe. On a warm California evening, far from the red carpets of London or the tradition-soaked halls of Buckingham Palace, a sudden medical crisis unfolded quietly behind the walls of Prince Harry's Montecito estate. No flashing ambulance lights, no sirens screaming through the night. Just shadows moving with intent. A medical team entering with urgency and secrecy. And a man, once known for his strength and defiance, lying unresponsive and still. According to a well-placed private security contact with experience managing high-profile medical emergencies, Prince Harry was found unconscious in the early hours of the morning in a private section of the residence, typically off-limits to staff. The staff member who discovered him reportedly hesitated for nearly an hour before alerting emergency services, possibly fearing the consequences of bypassing the tight inner circle that governs the Sussex household. When help was finally summoned, it came not from a local emergency dispatcher, but from a private emergency services provider often contracted by celebrities to avoid public attention. This provider dispatched a medical team trained in discretion who arrived in unmarked vehicles and entered through a private side entrance. Sources suggest they found the Duke in a non-responsive state, showing signs of what one medical expert described as chemical distress consistent with mixed substance ingestion. The exact nature of the substances involved remains unconfirmed. However, there are whispers, particularly from one nursing assistant familiar with the case, that the attending medical team administered emergency treatments typically reserved for sedative or opioid-related incidents. One mention stands out: naloxone, a medication used to reverse the effects of an opioid overdose. If true, this would be a significant indicator that what took place wasn't simply a panic attack or dehydration-related collapse. It would suggest that Prince Harry consumed, or was administered, something that severely disrupted his vital systems. What complicates this matter further is the string of clues from Prince Harry's past. In his own memoir, Spare, he openly discusses experimenting with drugs. He writes candidly about his use of marijuana, cocaine, and even psychedelics like ayahuasca and magic mushrooms. At the time, many readers praised him for his transparency, interpreting it as part of his mental health journey. But a careful reading reveals more than just youthful mistakes. It suggests a pattern of using substances not merely for recreation, but as an escape mechanism for deep psychological pain. Psychologists who've reviewed these passages point to repeated indicators of unresolved trauma. The death of his mother, the pressure of royal life, the betrayal he's expressed over his treatment by the royal institution, and the internal conflict between duty and rebellion have all taken their toll. And while therapy may have been part of his healing process, it now seems plausible that substances, whether prescribed or illicit, have also played a role. In this light, Lady C's claim that Harry's overdose was not accidental but rather the result of systematic control becomes more troubling. She paints a picture not of a wild prince spiraling out of control, but of a man being slowly eroded by those around him. According to her, Doria Ragland has taken an increasingly hands-on role in Harry's daily life, ensuring that he remains isolated, dependent, and emotionally unstable enough to be easily influenced. Such an accusation is not made lightly, but it raises important questions. Who has access to Harry's medication? Who determines his mental health treatment? Is he still seeing the therapist he once praised in interviews? And who, if anyone, is monitoring his intake and well-being when Meghan is away? There is a growing belief among some close to the couple that Harry has been over-medicated for months. Sources say his behavior has shifted from passionate and energetic to lethargic and detached. At public events, he has appeared either visibly agitated or unusually subdued. In several high-resolution photographs taken just weeks before the alleged hospital incident, Harry's pupils appear dilated, his posture slack, his skin pallid, subtle signs, but meaningful to those trained to spot them. Even his speech patterns have changed. In a video message released for a charitable initiative just a week before the hospitalization, Harry's delivery was flat. Viewers noticed he stumbled over simple phrases, slurred slightly at the edges of certain words, and appeared to lose track of his sentences halfway through. Some fans chalked it up to exhaustion or stress. But in hindsight, these could have been early warning signs of a deeper chemical imbalance. What makes this situation even more sensitive is the silence surrounding it. Unlike previous controversies, the Sussex team has not rushed to issue clarifications or denials. No family photos have been released to distract the public. No carefully staged interviews with Oprah or Anderson Cooper. The Instagram pages are quiet. The Archwell Foundation website has not been updated in days. It's the kind of silence that feels strategic and scared. A former palace aide who spoke on condition of anonymity said that this silence might indicate negotiations happening behind closed doors. If Harry is in the hospital, and if the situation involves substances, there will be legal implications, medical records, and most importantly, custody concerns. The royal family will want to know what happened, especially if children were present or if there's any risk to them. This, of course, brings the issue of Archie and Lilibet to the forefront. Were they home at the time? If so, who cared for them during the crisis? Were they kept away from Harry in the hours leading up to his hospitalization? These are difficult questions, but they need to be asked. Because if Harry was in a compromised state while responsible for the care of his children, it raises urgent concerns about their welfare. It's worth noting that California law requires medical professionals to report suspected cases of overdose involving minors if those minors may be at risk. If such a report was filed, it would initiate a child welfare review, something that could bring outside investigators into the inner workings of the Sussex home. It's unclear whether such an action has been taken, but legal experts say it is a real possibility. Adding further weight to the situation are reports that Meghan Markle was in New York when the incident occurred. According to flight logs and photos posted by entertainment journalists, Meghan was seen exiting a black SUV in Manhattan just hours before news of Harry's hospitalization broke. She was reportedly attending a series of high-level meetings with streaming and fashion executives. She has since returned to Montecito, but the timeline of her travel and the fact that she was absent during a critical moment has only fueled public speculation. Did Meghan know what was happening before she left? Was she aware that Harry was deteriorating emotionally or chemically? Or was her departure an attempt to escape a situation that had become untenable? What role, if any, did Doria play in Meghan's absence? Lady C has implied that Doria was fully in control during the critical period, that she was the one monitoring Harry, the one directing staff, the one handling the aftermath. If that's true, then her influence is no longer speculative. It's operational. And that kind of power over a royal, over anyone, is dangerous when unchecked. To understand how such a dynamic could form, one needs only to look at the structure of the Sussex household. Unlike traditional royal residences staffed by trained professionals under strict guidelines, the Montecito estate functions more like a private fortress. The staff is handpicked. Access is tightly controlled. Decisions are made not by public servants, but by individuals loyal to the couple. And perhaps, specifically, to Meghan and her mother. This lack of external oversight creates an environment where isolation can flourish, and where one individual's influence, slowly and methodically applied, can shape another's mental health trajectory over time. Medical professionals point out that such situations are not uncommon in cases of emotional dependency. Individuals suffering from trauma often gravitate toward figures who offer stability, only to find that stability become control. In some cases, caregivers overstep boundaries. They begin to make decisions that should be left to doctors, therapists, or even the patients themselves. And in rare but serious cases, this can lead to overmedication, emotional suppression, or worse, substance abuse disguised as treatment. If Prince Harry's overdose was accidental, it was likely preventable. If it was intentional, it was likely a cry for help. And if it was the result of external manipulation, it's a crisis that demands immediate scrutiny. What's clear is that this incident did not occur in a vacuum. It is the latest in a series of red flags that have appeared with increasing frequency over the past 2 years. And it suggests a downward spiral that may now be accelerating beyond anyone's control. Lady C's revelation, disturbing as it is, may be the first step toward breaking the silence. If Prince Harry is indeed recovering in a secure wing of a private hospital, now is the time for the people around him to take action. Not PR action, not legal maneuvering, but real, tangible steps to assess his mental health, his physical safety, and the environment in which he lives. Because if what happened in Montecito is true, then this is no longer a royal scandal. It's a medical emergency, a domestic crisis, a personal tragedy still unfolding behind closed doors. And the world is watching. For years, Doria Ragland maintained an image that, at first glance, appeared almost saintly. Soft-spoken, gracefully reserved. Her calm demeanor seemed to stand in stark contrast to the whirlwind of media scrutiny that swirled around her daughter, Meghan Markle. When Meghan's wedding to Prince Harry catapulted her into the global spotlight, Doria was seen as the grounding force in her daughter's life. Quiet, supportive, harmless. But the version of Doria Ragland that Lady C is now describing is anything but harmless. In the wake of Prince Harry's alleged hospitalization, Lady Colin Campbell has not minced her words. According to her, Doria is not simply a supportive mother-in-law. She is a key player, perhaps the key player, in the orchestration of Harry's personal unraveling. The question arises, how did a woman previously portrayed as a serene yoga instructor evolve into someone allegedly exerting manipulative control over a prince? To understand this, we must first examine Doria's transformation from private citizen to royal matriarch. Before the royal wedding, Doria led a quiet life in Los Angeles. She worked in the wellness industry, practiced yoga, and had a relatively unremarkable public presence. She raised Meghan mostly as a single mother after her separation from Thomas Markle, and she was often described as spiritual, thoughtful, and grounded. But very little was known about her in concrete terms. She gave no interviews. She had no obvious political ties or business ventures. She remained intentionally in the background. But things began to shift once Meghan and Harry relocated to California. Following the couple's departure from royal duties in early 2020, Doria was seen more frequently in and around their Montecito mansion. According to neighbors and Montecito locals, Doria is often spotted entering through private gates, staying for extended periods, and participating in family activities that go beyond occasional grandmotherly visits. Her presence was quiet but consistent. What was once a peripheral relationship with Harry began to intensify. Sources close to the household claim that Doria gradually became one of Harry's most trusted confidants, particularly after his rift with his own family deepened. As his bond with King Charles and Prince William weakened, it appears he increasingly leaned on Meghan's inner circle for emotional support. And at the center of that circle stood Doria. At first, this shift may have seemed natural. Harry, having lost his mother Diana at a young age, often gravitated toward maternal figures who offered nurturing stability. And Doria, with her gentle demeanor and background in mental wellness, fit that mold perfectly. But it's precisely this dynamic that Lady C and others are now questioning. According to Lady C, Doria's influence is not purely emotional, it is logistical and strategic. She allegedly has access to Harry's schedule, his private quarters, and most alarmingly, his medication. Several sources, including one former House staffer who requested anonymity, claim that Doria regularly attends doctor appointments with Harry, manages communication between medical staff and household aides, and has even taken over responsibility for administering his prescribed medication. This level of involvement is highly unusual, especially for someone with no formal medical training. It becomes even more concerning when placed in the context of Harry's alleged overdose. If Doria indeed had access to the medications he was using, whether for anxiety, depression, sleep disorders, or other ailments, then her role in his recent crisis must be critically examined. Even more disturbing are the whispers that Doria has acted to isolate Harry from others in his life, including staff members who were once part of his inner circle. A former aide who worked briefly with the couple after their move to the United States claims that Doria would often step in to intercept messages, cancel meetings, or speak on Harry's behalf even when he was present. She was always polite, the aide said, but it was clear she had authority. If Doria said something wasn't happening, it didn't happen. If she said Harry was too tired, people didn't question it. This level of control didn't develop overnight. It appears to have grown over time, subtly, quietly, and with increasing momentum. And it may have gone unnoticed, or at least unchallenged, due to Doria's unassuming image. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't seek public attention. But according to Lady C, she is pulling more strings than anyone outside the Montecito compound realizes. This theory becomes even more plausible when considered alongside Harry's recent behavior. Several experts in emotional dependency have pointed out that when individuals experience prolonged emotional distress, they can become reliant on specific people who act as emotional stabilizers. Over time, this can lead to a kind of learned helplessness, where the individual no longer makes decisions independently, but rather defers to the judgment of their caretaker, even when it comes to fundamental issues of health, safety, and personal boundaries. If Harry is indeed in such a state, and if Doria has become that stabilizer, then her control over his life could be deeply embedded and difficult to break. Adding to this complex picture is Doria's growing involvement in financial matters. Public records indicate that she has become a director or advisor to at least one organization linked to Archewell, Meghan, and Harry's foundation. Though her role is not prominently advertised, legal filings and insider reports suggest that she has input on key financial decisions. This aligns with Lady C's allegation that Doria is managing him very well, not just emotionally, but in terms of assets, appearances, and access. The implications are vast. If Doria controls his finances, his medication, his access to medical professionals, and even his schedule, then Prince Harry may no longer be acting with full autonomy. His decisions may reflect not his own will, but the influence of someone with very clear ideas about what's best, or what benefits those around him. And yet, despite the alarming claims, no one in Harry's extended family has stepped in. There have been no interventions. No public statements of concern. Nothing from Prince William, King Charles, or even close friends like Nacho Figueres. This absence has led some to speculate that Harry's isolation is not just emotional, but geographical and technological as well. Could it be that communication with the outside world is being filtered or restricted? Could Doria be acting as a gatekeeper between Harry and the rest of the world? Lady C believes the answer is yes. And if that is indeed the case, then what we are seeing is not just the result of a health crisis, but the culmination of a long-term strategy designed to make Prince Harry dependent, compliant, and ultimately, invisible. Even more revealing is the way Doria has handled public appearances. During high-profile events, such as Harry and Meghan's Netflix documentary, their wedding, and Archie's christening, Doria always appears composed, controlled, and presentable, but never too involved. She stays just out of frame. She avoids interviews. She never contradicts the public narrative. And yet, according to insiders, she is far more engaged than her public silence suggests. She is said to have input on staff hires, legal negotiations, and even which friends are allowed to visit the Montecito estate. Staffers describe her as the shadow matriarch, the person who keeps everything running behind the scenes while Meghan and Harry handle public appearances. But now, in light of the alleged overdose, this silent control takes on a darker tone. Because if Doria is the one behind the schedule, the medications, the access to friends and family, then it follows that she also had the power to prevent this incident. Or perhaps, more disturbingly, she may have contributed to it through overreach or neglect. Some royal experts are even suggesting that Doria's influence may extend back further than previously believed. One biographer claims that Doria played a crucial role in encouraging Harry and Meghan to step away from the royal family, not simply as a supportive mother, but as a strategic advisor pushing for independence, control, and privacy. A move that, in hindsight, may have created the perfect environment for quiet domination. Without the structure of royal protocol, without the checks and balances of palace advisors, without even the watchful eye of the British press, Harry was left vulnerable. Vulnerable to his own trauma, vulnerable to manipulation, and vulnerable to the influence of someone who, while possibly well-intentioned, may have crossed the line from care to control. There are still many unanswered questions. What does Meghan know about the extent of her mother's influence? Does she support it? Has she delegated power to Doria in a bid to protect Harry or to maintain order? These are difficult questions that only those inside the home can answer. But from the outside looking in, a pattern is emerging. And it is this pattern that Lady C has brought to light. Her allegations are not without evidence. Her claims are not baseless speculation. They are grounded in behavioral observations, staff testimonies, and a growing number of discrepancies between what the public sees and what insiders describe. In the end, the story of Doria Ragland may not be one of villainy, but of unchecked access, of a well-meaning maternal figure who became too involved, too powerful, and too dominant in the life of a man whose world was already unraveling. But regardless of her intentions, the results speak for themselves. Prince Harry is in the hospital. His public presence is deteriorating. His connection to his family is nearly severed. And his life, according to those who know him best, no longer looks like his own. As this story continues to unfold, all eyes will turn not just to Meghan and Harry, but to the woman behind the scenes. The one who has avoided the spotlight, the one who has said the least, and the one who, if Lady C is right, may be holding all the cards. In the hours and days following Prince Harry's alleged overdose and hospitalization, the world turned its gaze not only to him, but to Meghan Markle, his wife, partner, and the person many expected would immediately spring into action in a crisis of this magnitude. Yet, to the surprise of both supporters and critics alike, Meghan's initial response appeared marked more by silence than urgency. Her absence during the unfolding event only added fuel to the growing speculation and unease. Where exactly was she when Prince Harry collapsed? And perhaps more importantly, why wasn't she there? Flight logs, paparazzi photos, and insider tips began to paint a puzzling timeline. According to multiple sources, Meghan Markle was in New York City when the alleged medical incident occurred at their Montecito home. The reason for her trip, based on publicized but lightly promoted reports, was to attend a string of closed-door meetings with high-profile executives, including media representatives from Netflix and lifestyle brand stakeholders. The meetings were purportedly related to future content partnerships, branding opportunities, and a new campaign involving the Archwell brand's wellness division. While it is not unusual for Meghan to engage in professional engagements independently, what raised eyebrows was the coincidental timing. At the very moment her husband was reportedly being rushed to a private hospital for a critical emergency, possibly an overdose, she was seen exiting the lobby of a luxury hotel, smiling faintly, speaking with her assistant, and entering a chauffeured black SUV with tinted windows. There was no sense of panic, no visible disruption in her itinerary. No public comment, rushed departure, or alteration of plans in the immediate hours after the medical incident became public knowledge among select press circles. This silence was deafening. Royal commentators quickly took note. As the narrative surrounding Harry's hospitalization gathered steam, Meghan's name began trending alongside it, but for the wrong reasons. Many expected a formal statement, a photograph of her visiting the hospital, an acknowledgement through Archewell's official social media channels. But instead, there was nothing. No denial, no confirmation, no gesture of empathy or concern toward her husband made public in any form. This behavior sharply contrasts with how Meghan has handled crises in the past. When Archie was allegedly targeted with racist commentary, she publicly addressed it. When she experienced a miscarriage, she wrote a personal op-ed. When the royal family questioned the color of her unborn child's skin, she cried on Oprah. Meghan has shown a pattern of seizing control of the narrative, especially when victimhood or personal distress is involved. So why was this different? There are several possible explanations, but none of them paint a reassuring picture. One theory is that Meghan did not want to jeopardize her business meetings and was unwilling to abandon a potentially lucrative trip to address a private family emergency. This theory is supported by a leaked text from an assistant in her team, who allegedly wrote to a colleague, "She's monitoring it. He's stable. No need to change flights yet." If verified, that message would confirm that Meghan was aware of the situation but made the decision to continue with her itinerary. Another theory suggests that Meghan had been informed of Harry's emotional and physical instability days before the incident and may have chosen to distance herself temporarily as a way of creating boundaries. This theory is supported by insiders who say that tensions within the household had reached a boiling point weeks prior, with Meghan allegedly frustrated over Harry's mood swings, unpredictable behavior, and what she reportedly referred to as his emotional spirals. If these reports are accurate, it would suggest that Meghan's absence wasn't accidental, it was strategic. She may have been creating space to avoid becoming entangled in yet another personal crisis. But that strategy, if true, backfired spectacularly in the court of public opinion. As news of the hospitalization spread, Meghan's detachment was interpreted not as calm professionalism, but as calculated coldness. The optics were damaging. Social media exploded with commentary questioning Meghan's priorities. Critics accused her of abandoning her husband in his time of need. Even supporters found it difficult to reconcile the apparent disconnect between her publicly crafted image of nurturing mother and concerned wife with her visible distance during Harry's reported collapse. It is also possible that Meghan's silence and inaction were part of a larger strategy coordinated with public relations professionals. Her PR team may have advised her to avoid making statements until more information became available or until a cohesive spin could be crafted. After all, reacting too soon, without knowing the medical details, without having the palace's position, could expose her to legal or reputational risks. Still, the contrast with past behavior is stark. During less severe public relations challenges, Meghan and Harry have been swift to release statements, launch interviews, and control headlines. In this instance, the vacuum left by their silence has only made the story more mysterious and more ominous. Lady C, speaking again in a follow-up segment, commented on Meghan's reaction, or lack thereof. "People need to ask why the Duchess of Sussex was hundreds of miles away while her husband was allegedly in medical peril," she said. "If your husband collapsed from an overdose, God forbid, would you stay at a business meeting? Or would you drop everything to be by his side?" That statement echoed in countless headlines, not because it was cruel, but because it posed a fundamental question that many readers and viewers were already asking. Adding another layer to the controversy is the fact that Meghan's mother, Doria Ragland, was reportedly present at the Montecito estate while Meghan was away. According to one neighbor, who claims to have seen Doria's vehicle come and go during the period in question, the elder woman was definitely in charge during that week. The idea that Meghan delegated the care of her husband to her mother, and that her mother had access to medications, schedules, and possibly medical professionals, raises serious questions about trust, delegation, and responsibility. If Doria was the primary caregiver during this period, it leads to the uncomfortable possibility that Meghan had, in some way, absolved herself of direct responsibility. Whether out of emotional fatigue, frustration, or strategic planning, this perceived abdication of care is causing ripples among observers. Former royal aide Simon Collins, speaking anonymously, offered this perspective. If Harry was in crisis and Meghan chose to be elsewhere, it tells us a great deal about the state of their relationship. This isn't about a business trip. This is about priorities. And the optics, fair or unfair, are brutal. Some insiders close to the entertainment industry speculate that Meghan has already begun carving out her next chapter, a solo one. There are whispers of upcoming book deals, solo speaking engagements, and even the potential for a reality-style docuseries centered around her post-royal identity as a working mother, entrepreneur, and activist. If true, this would suggest a gradual pivot away from the joint Sussex brand towards something more independent. Could this moment, Prince Harry's alleged overdose and Meghan's absence, be the first real fracture point in their public partnership? Supporters of the Duchess argue that she should not be expected to drop everything for every family issue, that her career and commitments matter too. They point to the fact that no formal statement has confirmed the details of Harry's condition and caution against jumping to conclusions without verified medical reports. They claim that Meghan's silence may be protective, not indifferent. But even those arguments fall short when measured against the emotional expectations placed on a spouse, especially one who has positioned herself as a champion of emotional well-being and mental health. Meghan has spoken at length about therapy, about support systems, about the importance of being present for loved ones in crisis. And yet, in this most critical moment, she was not present. Not publicly, not visibly. And in the world of public perception, visibility is everything. It's also worth noting that the Archewell Foundation has not issued any updates or clarifications regarding Harry's health. In the past, even minor issues, like the birth of their children or their travel arrangements, have been documented, discussed, and publicly spun. This complete radio silence feels different. It suggests either that the situation is far more serious than anyone is willing to admit, or that the internal crisis has outpaced the PR machine's ability to respond. If Meghan were to address the incident now, days after the fact, the delay would already have cost her valuable credibility. If she continues to remain silent, the public may interpret that silence as callous detachment. It's a no-win situation unless a carefully crafted narrative emerges soon, one that shows concern, compassion, and control. But so far, none of those elements are visible. Instead, what the public sees is a woman in New York, dressed impeccably, stepping into luxury vehicles, taking meetings, smiling faintly, and a man in a hospital, allegedly unconscious, revived by emergency medication, surrounded by staff, but not his wife. That disconnect may become the defining image of this entire ordeal. Whether intentional or accidental, Meghan's reaction to Prince Harry's hospitalization has become a story in itself, a story of emotional distance, strategic silence, and perhaps the slow unraveling of a carefully curated image. In a monarchy as old and tightly controlled as the British royal family, silence is never simply silence. It's calculated. It's strategic. It's a message wrapped in restraint. And in the case of Prince Harry's alleged overdose and hospitalization, the silence from Buckingham Palace has been particularly deafening. Not a single line has been issued. No comment. No clarification. Not even the vague, no comment on private family matters that has often been used as a buffer in previous scandals. The palace has said nothing. This silence has prompted a wave of questions that go far beyond concern for Prince Harry's well-being. Is the royal family unaware of the situation? Unlikely. Are they choosing not to respond due to the private nature of the incident? Possibly. Or is this silence part of a broader and more deliberate strategy, a silent declaration that Harry is no longer their concern, no longer under their protection, and no longer one of them? To understand the implications of this silence, we need to look back at how the palace has handled previous royal emergencies, scandals, and health crises. When Prince Philip was hospitalized, multiple updates were issued, even when details were scarce. When Queen Elizabeth faced health concerns, a carefully worded statement was almost always dispatched to reassure the public and uphold the institution's image of stability. Even during Prince Andrew's scandal, the palace, though slow, ultimately released statements and took action. But with Harry, it's different. Since his formal exit from royal duties, there has been a quiet but firm effort to separate his personal affairs from the inner workings of the royal institution. The term private citizen has been used repeatedly by royal spokespeople in reference to Harry and Meghan, particularly in legal disputes and public controversies. That framing allows the palace to detach itself from accountability when something happens involving the couple. And now, that detachment is on full display. If Prince Harry truly is in the hospital following an overdose, and the palace is fully aware, then their refusal to acknowledge it publicly suggests a total institutional disengagement. It is a stark contrast to the early days of Megxit, when palace courtiers and aides scrambled to frame Harry and Meghan's decisions in a palatable way, calling them modern and progressive. Now, the walls have closed. The ties have seemingly been cut. And the message is clear: whatever happens to Harry in California is not a royal problem anymore. But is this just self-protection on the part of the palace, or something more cold-blooded? Some royal watchers believe the palace's silence is not just about image, but about safeguarding the line of succession and preserving the crown's long-term reputation. From this perspective, acknowledging Harry's alleged overdose would draw unwanted scrutiny onto the monarchy's failure to help him in time, or even worse, fuel the perception that internal family tensions may have contributed to his decline. By remaining silent, the palace can avoid being pulled into the mess, even if it means appearing emotionally disconnected from one of their own. It's a classic case of institutional survival: maintain the crown, protect the brand, minimize the fallout. Yet, behind the scenes, insiders say that not everyone within the royal family is indifferent. One former courtier, who served under Queen Elizabeth and still maintains contact with senior figures, claims that Prince William is fully informed of his brother's condition. But the source says William has not reached out directly, at least not publicly or through any official channels. Why? Because, according to the same insider, the message from above is that the monarchy cannot risk being drawn into another Sussex storm, especially one involving drugs, hospitalization, and emotional collapse. This doesn't mean there isn't concern, but the concern is filtered, institutionalized, and ultimately silenced if it conflicts with the monarchy's larger narrative. That narrative now centers around King Charles's steady reign, Prince William's preparation for the throne, and the rehabilitation of the monarchy's public image after a turbulent few years. Allowing a scandal involving Harry to dominate headlines again, especially one that paints the royals as negligent or emotionally absent, would derail that effort. And so, silence becomes not a lack of compassion, but a survival mechanism. But this approach is not without risk. Many members of the public, especially those who still see Harry as the people's prince, view the palace's silence as cold, calculated, and even cruel. In online forums, on talk shows, and across social media, people are beginning to ask, has the institution abandoned one of its own? Is there no room for compassion behind the palace gates? These questions are dangerous for an institution built on loyalty, tradition, and moral authority. Because once the public starts to believe the palace doesn't care about its own blood, especially one who fought in wars, served the monarchy, and brought a new generation of royals into the world, the institution loses more than just political capital. It loses its soul. Others argue that the palace's silence may be temporary. They speculate that advisors are working behind the scenes to confirm details, speak with legal teams, and monitor public reaction before releasing a carefully worded statement. If true, this would be in keeping with the palace's long-standing rule of never complain, never explain, a doctrine rooted in stoicism, not apathy. But that doctrine may be outdated in today's world of instant news, viral content, and growing distrust in institutions. The public expects transparency, and when silence lasts too long, it is often mistaken for guilt, indifference, or fear. There's also the possibility that the palace's silence reflects a complex emotional reality, that they are, quite simply, torn. On one hand, Harry is family. He's Charles's son, Diana's boy, William's brother. But on the other, he is also the man who accused them of racism, called out their failure to protect his wife, and revealed intimate family details in a best-selling memoir watched by millions. He walked away. He made that choice. And now, the institution is making its own, to focus on the future, not the past. Still, it's hard to believe that Queen Elizabeth, were she alive today, would have remained completely silent. She was known for her sense of duty, but also for her quiet, personal gestures. She might not have made a public statement, but she would have reached out privately. Perhaps that's happening now, behind closed doors. But if it is, the public doesn't know it, and perception is everything. Public perception now leans toward the belief that Harry is truly alone. And whether that perception is fair or not, it is powerful. Lady C has made this argument loudly. In a recent interview, she said, Harry has been abandoned, not just by Meghan when she left town, but by his own family. And that should disturb us all. Because if the palace turns its back on him, it means they never really cared to begin with. It's a bold statement, but it taps into a growing discomfort among even the monarchy's defenders. How far should the institution go to protect itself before it becomes soulless? How much silence is too much? For years, the royal family has survived scandals by waiting them out. Time passes. Attention shifts. Scandals fade. But this one feels different. This one involves life and death, addiction, manipulation, possibly abuse of power. If Harry's condition worsens, or if more information comes to light confirming the overdose, the palace may be forced to break its silence. And when it does, the wording of that statement will be dissected line by line. Every phrase, every omission, every tone. Until then, the silence speaks volumes. It says that Harry's crisis is his alone, that the institution cannot, and perhaps will not, save him. That the break, once imagined as temporary, is now permanent. And that the monarchy, for all its pomp and grandeur, may not have room for human fragility. This moment could mark the final fracture in the already broken relationship between Harry and his family. Not because of harsh words or media scandals, but because when he fell, no one reached out. At least not in a way the world could see. And in this world, where perception is often more powerful than reality, that silence may prove more damaging than anything Harry ever wrote in spare. Long before the headlines of a possible overdose began circulating, Prince Harry had been open about his struggles with mental health. From television interviews to intimate memoir confessions, Harry painted a picture of a man haunted by his past, tormented by unresolved trauma, and constantly seeking peace in a world that rarely afforded him privacy or emotional safety. But in hindsight, what once looked like vulnerability now appears to many as a roadmap, one that led to a far darker destination than anyone imagined. Understanding the timeline of Prince Harry's emotional battles is crucial to grasping how he got here. It provides insight into his behavioral patterns, his decisions, and the kind of environment that may have enabled his alleged breakdown. The signs were there all along, but they weren't fully understood. Some were dismissed as celebrity quirks. Others were chalked up to the pressures of royal life. But when placed together, they form a chain of red flags that, if taken seriously, may have changed the trajectory of his life. The first and perhaps most pivotal moment was the death of his mother, Princess Diana, in 1997. Harry was just 12 years old when the tragedy struck. In his own words, it was the moment that cracked something deep within him. For years, he avoided speaking about it publicly, choosing instead to bury the grief beneath duty, rebellion, and silence. But internally, the wound festered. In a 2017 interview with journalist Brian E. Gordon, Harry revealed that he did not process his mother's death for nearly 2 decades. "I shut down all my emotions," he said. "It was only when I was in my late 20s that I began to deal with it." He admitted that the repressed grief led to years of total chaos in his personal life, including bouts of anxiety, aggression, and emotional shutdown. By the time he reached 28, he said he was close to a complete breakdown. It was around that time he reportedly began seeking therapy.